Okay, so at this point, we've installed the necessary packages. Let's go to the README. Okay, sends us to the main file there, but we can deduce here. I'm just going to run build. Okay, then here, let's just look at some of this code. Yes, this is exactly the code that we saw before. Awesome. So let's go to the instructions there. Okay, so if you were setting this up from scratch, you would create a folder called weather, you would cd in there, and then you would create an npm package.json file with this command here, npm init space -y. Then you would install the model context protocol SDK as well as ZOD. And you would also install Node TypeScript types as well as TypeScript. And then you're going to create a directory called source and then a file called index.ts. Here, we're going to update our package.json. We're going to add this script here. And then we're going to add type module bin. We're going to put weather. And the value there is ./build/index.js. For files, we're going to put the value build within square brackets. And then we have a tsconfig file here. Next, we have our index.ts file that was in that source folder we created. Here, we're going to paste in this code. So we're creating a new instance of the MCP server. We're giving it a name, weather, version, and capabilities. So within capabilities, we have resources as well as tools. Now we have a helper function. So this is essentially going to allow us to query and format data from the National Weather Service API. So that's what they're abbreviating with NWS. Here, it's essentially just a regular fetch request. We're getting the data and passing it through. Here we have a few types that we've defined. And then we have implementing tool execution. So this here is going to register tools. Server.tool, get alerts. This seems like a description. And then we're passing in some type of schema for the parameters that we're expecting. And this is the execution block. So we're going to pass in the state, and then we're going to run these function tool calls as we normally would. From there, we're going to essentially create another tool. This one is called getForecast. Here's the description, and then we're going to pass it these parameters, latitude and longitude. We'll pass this to the executing block, and we're going to call in this method that we referenced earlier from that API. Awesome. Now it says running the server. Here, we can see that we're just going to create a transport here, and then we're going to pass that into server.connect as an argument. We've got a catch block here after running main. And then it says make sure to run npm run build to build your server. This is a very important step in getting your server to connect. So here it says, let's now test your server from an existing MCP host, Claude for desktop. So here it says, let's just double check. Okay, so first make sure we have Claude for desktop installed. And then here it says we will need to configure Claude for Desktop for whichever MCP server you want to use. To do this, open up Claude for Desktop configuration here in the text editor. Make sure to create the file if it doesn't exist. Okay. It says you can then add your servers in the MCP servers key. The MCP UI elements will only show up in Claude for Desktop if at least one server is properly configured. In this case, we'll add our single weather server like this. Here, we've got weather, giving it a command, and then we're giving it arguments. So this tells Claude for Desktop, there's an MCP server named weather. Launch it by running node absolute path here. Okay. Save the file and then reconnect it with Claude Desktop. Okay, so here I have Claude Code, or rather Claude Desktop. So here I have Claude Desktop, and I'm going to go ahead and click Settings. Next, I'll go ahead and let you see what I'm looking at here. We can head over to Developer. Now, this is a previous MCP. I'm going to place with my actual folder. And at this point, we can consider this already saved because I have autosave enabled. Hit the X button, and I'll actually quit Claude. This button here, Search and Tools, I'll see the weather added as one of the tools. And I can see both of these tools. We can interact with it and say, hey, what's the situation in San Diego, California? Okay, so this one I didn't give it that potential. So I'm gonna give it an actual a weather alert from California using your tools. So now you'll see this pop up. I'm going to say always allow. So it's passing in this as the parameters. And now it's giving me those alerts. So that's how you create an MCP locally. As you can see, pretty simple to create the MCP server. Now I'm going to have it interact with a database, and then we'll go ahead and create our own MCP client. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an app.ts file that essentially looks just like the index.ts file, except it's going to interact with our MongoDB database instead of with the weather alert API. And that should allow us to talk to Claude Desktop and see whether it's able to create journal entries and interact with an external database using our hosted server here. So in just a few minutes, we'll have that code available to us. Awesome. So here we see that we do in fact have that code available. Let's install the required packages. Awesome. So now we're checking the existing package.json. And from there, we're just pointing to the correct folder. So instead of going into this index here, we're telling it to go into app. Well, actually, we're running the required variable here, depending on the situation, which is pretty cool. So here it says run a build. Okay. So at this point, we still have our same MCP server. We went ahead and ran a build, and we want to be able to get our Claude desktop to interact with. So as you can see, it's pointing to index.js instead of app.js. Start from the tools, which are here. So I'll say I want to create a journal entry saying, thank God this MCP is finally working. Actually, all right, so always allow. Amazing. Okay, so now that we're in my account, let's check out browse collections. And here we have it, the journal entry created by Claude. So we can continue asking Claude a few questions. So create a journal entry listing all of the steps in MCP server creation with Node.js TypeScript. Now I do think I have a front end for this. Let's see if I can pull that out. Okay, so I'm going to connect my. Okay, so now we're going to check out the UI. Okay, so here are the journal entries from the MongoDB assistant. You can see here it's giving me all the steps for creating a front-end MCP client. So here I'm using Claude, and I'll say, okay, do it for creating a backend MCP server. Okay, so here it's breaking down the steps. Okay, so now if I refresh, I'll see that this was just created. And here I'm interacting with my MCP server. So now we want to deploy this MCP server so that anyone can connect with it and have the same results. So let's get started with that.